welcome to the Biz Coach Show, hosted by my Biz Coaches and presented by the TLG Group. Our show focuses on giving entrepreneurs the edge they need to succeed. Your hosts today are David Macon, that's me, and Eric Whitmore. Eric, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, David. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, always good to be with you, Eric. We're also joined again by Jim Wilkerson with my Biz Coaches. Jim, how are you doing?
I'm doing great today, David. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, hey, great to have you back with us. We also have a few guests on. Let's get to know our guests a little bit better. Our first guest is Hannah Johnson. Hannah is an expert on business finance, insurance, and wealth management. She's the founder-owner of TLG Growth, where she lives out her passion to help people protect themselves, their money, and their ability to make money, which is their biggest asset. Hannah is also the founder of the Bold Women's Network. Hannah, so great to have you with us today. Thanks for joining. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Great to have you. Our next guest is Ed McIntyre. Ed is an authority on small business finance, insurance, and sustainable wealth. He's the owner-operator of EDS Wealth Agency. Ed is on a mission to give every American the resources to retire with the peace of mind that their growing fortune will last beyond a lifetime, creating a legacy for generations to come. Ed has started and ran over a dozen businesses over the last 27 years. Prior to his career in business, Ed served in the U.S. Navy and Air National Guard. Ed, first, let me thank you for your service, and it's so great to have you with us. How are you doing today?
Outstanding. Why not? It's always a choice.
Fantastic. Well, really excited to have you guys with us and very excited about our topic today. But before we get to that, for our audience out there, be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. We have a lot of amazing guests just like we do today, so we want to make sure you don't miss any future episodes of our show. So let's talk about today's topic. It is the elusive exit, and I'll just kind of start us out with this concept that a lot of business owners have, which is this dream that their business is their exit strategy, but oftentimes it turns into a nightmare. Why is that?
Well,
all right. Go ahead, Ed, please.
I was just going to say, so, in my many companies I owned, at one point, 3 of those businesses were furniture stores, really large furniture stores in 2 different states, 3 different cities. And, I had well over $1 million in inventory. And in my mind, the whole time I was running that company, we had great cash flow. That was my retirement. A, you sell off all the inventory, I have $1 million to retire with. Or B, I sell the company, because when I get older, I'll just sell the company. It's worth a lot of money, and that is my retirement. Turned out not to be the case. 2008 proved that inventory can go down when business isn't being done very well.
Absolutely. Yeah, well said, Ed. You had some thoughts, Eric?
Yeah, I was going to say it similarly. We in the process of evolving my Biz Coaches, one of the things that I dug into extensively was recognizing, asking the question. A lot of people, they get to the point they think that's the exit strategy to sell the business. And the more I dug into that, I'd done a lot of research and realized that's not the case. More specifically, not only not the case, it's seldom the case, almost never the case. Jim and I think spoke on this last week, but just kind of high level, 80% of the businesses never get listed. And if they get listed, then there's like at best a 40-60 chance, 40% being a good chance that they'll actually sell. Because most of the businesses were never designed to sell. They weren't created and built and structured in a way to effectively sell as an asset, which is what any intelligent investor is going to want to do, is buy a cash flowing asset. And a business isn't a cash flowing asset if the primary focus of the business is centered around the business owner, which is often how most small business owners build their business. So it becomes a major challenge, and in many cases, like the albatross around their neck, because you can't get away from it, right? So, but that's a challenge, and a lot of people don't know, don't understand, and then don't plan accordingly for it. So there's a lot that goes into that. I'm excited to hear about some of the ideas that I know Jim will have some thoughts on it, as well as Ed and Hannah. How could we pull some of that cash out of the business while it's effectively, to your point, Ed, making really good cash flow and we got money coming in, how do we pull it out of the business tax deferred or some kind of strategy that's going to allow us to put money away to use it for retirement? That way, if we can't sell the business for some reason, or it's bad timing, right? 2008, you mentioned that. One of the problems with 2008 was nobody saw it coming, or at least anybody who did wasn't telling everybody. Or if they were, nobody was listening, right? That's to be fair. But with all of that said, the challenge was when it played out, it was kind of like if you were trying to sell your business at that time, man, you had like a 5-year window where it was like, nope, you're not retiring now. Set on it and wait, right? Not to mention if you had any kind of retirement funds that tied up and probably reducing as well. So not a good scenario all the way around. But so I'll open the floor. I'd love to hear some thoughts on that because I know there's some strategies that you can take advantage of.
Well, before we get into the strategies, Eric, I just want to ask you a quick question to my biz coaches. Is there are ways to take a business that's existing that might be more of an entrepreneur business where you can show how to scale it properly to become a sellable asset, correct?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, appreciate you putting that plug in there.
Well, I think that's the biggest problem with entrepreneurs is we always think my business is worth this because it's around me, but it's all built around the owner.
Right.
They never properly scale a business to be an asset. They scale a business to what fits them and their lifestyle.
Right.
And so the cash flow is getting burnt up in the company or burnt up by them without ever taking advantage of tax loopholes and tax diverged strategies to grow those funds. And that's what Hannah and I specialize in. We specialize in entrepreneurs and small business owners that really would like to grow retirement and just don't even know where to start or how to activate that. So, there's only 3 legal ways in America to grow money tax deferred and then access that money tax free later in life. And that's what we do is we show people how to create personal pension plans through their cash flow of their companies to create that massive compound interest growth over time. So when they get to retirement age, not only do they have a nest egg to retire with, but they can access those funds 100% tax free because they grew it the proper way.
Excellent. Appreciate that. Jim, I know you got some experience with that. You want to elaborate a little, offer any additional thought?
Well, sure. I mean, let's face it, for most small business, especially not necessarily one maybe as big as a multi-million-dollar furniture store, the real value is in the relationships, and the relationship with the owner is with the customer really has the most value of anything. So when someone's thinking about selling their business, if that relationship is not passed into the company itself somehow, there's not going to be no value when the owner walks away. So I think that's the biggest thing that people have to overcome and figure out a way to scale it. Like you said, there are ways to do it. All kinds of methods. I told a story last week about a client I had, that small concrete company that wanted to retire in 5 years. They hadn't saved much money, but they had great cash flow and they only had a handful of employees. And so I introduced him to a tax attorney, and he said, well, have you ever thought about a defined benefit plan? And said, well, what is that? And so it was a way to take corporate cash out of the business, segregate it mostly for the 2 owners, the husband and wife. And then they were able to take that money and roll it into an IRA. When they retired, it was millions of dollars over a very short period of time. And they literally gave their business to their employees.
Yeah, great story. I love hearing that because I think that's a good reminder of being flexible and recognize, okay, what's your goal? What do you want to accomplish? And Ed, I know, having had conversations with you in the past, and Hannah, it's like, first I need to understand what your goals, because if I understand your goals, then we can get creative on how we get those end goals, right? So then we can create a strategy, and in doing so, we can figure out exactly what you need to do each year in the preceding years, so that we know, that you're going to put this much money aside, or you're going to do this, or we're going to put it in this fund, or we're going to split it into multiple funds, or whatever that looks like. And the idea being is that by knowing your end goal, we can create that strategy, and then we just make sure that in each year we're checking in to make sure we stay in that strategy. When the issue becomes, you wait till the last minute, and now we don't have any runway, right? That's where we run into those problems. Or like I mentioned earlier, you get a bad economic circumstance and now you can't sell even if you wanted to, or at least nobody's going to be willing to buy, and you got to sit and wait until it's better circumstances. So never a good scenario. So the more that we can strategically plan, it usually works out much better.
Another example I would give is that I had a friend that had a pretty good sized business, and same sort of situation. It was relationship business and non-tangible assets mostly. I said, why don't you just buy the building that you're in? So he took the money out of the business, and he wasn't renting. He took out a loan, bought the building, and didn't really care how much he got for the business because he was getting a tremendous amount of rent for the person that moved in and took the company over.
Yeah, great point.
A simple strategy just like that can make all the difference.
Right. Yeah, and we spend in my Biz Coaches, it's one of the things, again, how can we structure the business correctly? But that's part of it is structuring it is one thing. We need to make sure that we have a good financial strategy as well, because structuring it to sell it is one thing. The other thing that we haven't touched on yet, but yet another challenge can be with selling is the tax consequences. There's significant tax consequences that can happen when you sell, because you're probably looking at 50 cents on the dollar. So if you build a business up and you decide you're going to sell it and you're going to get $3 million for it, well, pretty close to about half of that is going to go to the taxes. Mm-hmm. So that's not necessarily the ideal scenario. And then, you look at all the different ways you can sell a business, and there can be challenges with that. So Ed, any thoughts? I know you had a number of different businesses, as I have over the years. I'm curious, what are some of the thoughts you have in regards to that?
Well, it's funny you're just talking about selling a company, because I just had a guy call me 2 weeks ago that he's already a client. We're already doing personal stuff for him on a personal basis. Well, out of the blue, he had a major company across the U.S. call him and say, hey, we want to move into Tulsa, Oklahoma. We want your company.
Nice.
And they offered him a ridiculous amount of money for it. And so he was like, okay. So he sold it. Well, then he calls me up all excited. He's like, hey, I just sold it. I just left the closing, but they said I'm going to pay this much in taxes. I'm like, yes. It all happened, and you're just now calling me, after that. So his main concern now is, okay, well, I thought I was having this much. I got this much. After it's all said and done, how do I take this and be able to turn that into renewable investment strategies where I can utilize that money over and over and over to create leverage income from other businesses without depleting that source of income? So, we set up infinite banking for him, and we showed him how to use infinite banking to be able to utilize that money, have access to it tax-free at all times, put that in other investments, and then pull those investments out to repay his infinite banking on himself.
Right. And can you do, I have a general idea of infinite banking, but for a high level for our listeners, would you, do you mind kind of giving us a quick perspective of what that looks like?
Absolutely. So infinite banking, first, you have to understand real quick, and I'll do this extremely high level, index accounts. So index accounts is a way that you can grow money where you get the upside of the market, that you can never lose a penny when the market goes down. So your principal is never at risk. And once interest is credited to the account, it can never be removed back out. So your money can only grow or stay the same. It can't ever deplete. So you use index accounts to put into an infinite banking strategy. And infinite banking is basically banking on yourself. So you're growing your money. You have access to those funds, tax-free, to be able to pull out and use for investments, and you pay yourself back. So simplified is this. Let's say I have my own infinite banking account, and a car's not what you want to use it for, but I'll use it for the illustration for understanding not big numbers of business deals. But you have $50,000 in your infinite bank account and you want to go buy a $30,000 car. Well, if my infinite bank account's averaging 8% gains, and I'm going to borrow it from myself and pay 4% interest on that, I'm still making 4% profit on my money. That's still there. If I go to a bank and I borrow it from a bank to buy that car, I'm going to pay them 5% interest on that loan. So by doing it on myself, that's a 9% swing. I'm keeping 4% for myself, and I'm not paying 5% over here. That's a 9% swing on your own portfolio in your favor. So you're getting your own arbitrage on your accounts. So infinite banking is just money that can never lose money, that you can pull out used preferably for investment purposes that pays
Right.
an income back. Take that back, pay yourself back, so that way all of your money's still there for your next investment. But now you just got an asset or a business or cash flow from another investment that's flowing money also.
Absolutely. Yeah, appreciate that. I know it's something I learned about probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And the more that I understood it, the more that I dig into it. I'm like, this is a phenomenal idea. And ironically, I was literally just reading a book about acquiring businesses. I want to say it was Build Not Buy, I believe was the name of it. David, can you check me on that? What's that? Already on it. But the owner, the author of the book was talking about, rather than building a business, I'm sorry, I said build, buy, not build. But the owner of the author of the book was saying you should buy an existing business that you're familiar with, you're comfortable with, you feel like you can grow and build. You should buy an existing business and build it rather than starting one from scratch. And the logic behind it is you can get the financing you need for it. And he actually introduced the strategy of using infinite banking to be able to borrow against yourself and use that money to buy the business, and then you're paying yourself back. So, or use a group of people to leverage that and use that same structure. So, pretty interesting concept. I was just like, oh wow, I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. Certainly, would be a little bit more money, but the one thing that you can leverage other scenarios as well, trying to pull those resources together to be able to acquire the business.
And Eric, it's buy then build. So
buy then build. Thank you for clarifying. And the author?
The author is Walker Deibel.
There you go. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yep.
Make sure we get our fact checker. David's phenomenal at that. He'll call me out on everything. Hannah, any thoughts you have in this topic?
I just want to pinpoint the fact that you said plan. Right. I mean, time is what can kill any plan, is if you don't have time, right, to implement it. And that's where a lot of people in the day and age that we are in today, they don't take consideration that we need that time. Your money needs that time to grow. Your businesses need that time to grow. Time is important. Who was it that said that if you want to sit underneath the shade of a tree, you needed to grow that tree 20 years ago? The next best time is now, so that you can have that shade in the next 20 years. That's so true. It's so very true. So time is really important. So there's not really time to think about it later. It's now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great point. And to your point, when we have those conversations with business owners, it's like, okay, well, you didn't do that yet. You haven't done it yet. Can we start thinking about that now? Right. And project out what that might look like, because if we start now, we have more time, to your point, to make the adjustments that we need to make.
Yeah. One of my favorite things I tell my managers and operation officers when I go talk to them, I go, hey, so what is going on with this? And they're like, well, and my favorite saying is, if you fail to plan, your plan is to fail. And
that's right.
I quote that all the time to my team, to my managers, and I'm like, you have to know what's going on at all times and for the future, not just today. It's got to be laid out for the roadmap, because as you said earlier, Eric, you run out of runway.
Yep.
You got to have a plan in place and be able to go for it. So that's the great thing about infinite banking, is you can create those plans through your own funds.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I'll add, we talked about the elusive exit, and we shared about the disappointing statistics about how many people are actually able to sell. What's interesting, even more interesting, and Jim and I have had this conversation before, the number of people that are reaching retirement age that are small business owners. So there's 32 million-ish, somewhere around there, small businesses in the United States. And of those 32 million, I think the statistic is right now about 9,500 people a day are reaching retirement age. So those baby boomers that are reaching retirement age, there's almost 30% of those people are those 32 million small business owners. So when you kind of factor in those numbers, that means of the 9,500 people a day, 9,700, whatever the exact number was, that are retiring per day, you're looking at about 3,000 of those people are small business owners. That's a lot of people getting to the end of their careers, deciding it's time to, hang up the sneakers or whatever it is, and move on and do something better, right? And they're realizing probably now that they didn't have a good plan, and consequently, they're not going to be able to sell their business. So when you factor in the number of people that have had businesses and really great businesses over the years, just didn't structure them correctly to be able to sell. And now they're getting to the end of the road and they've run out of runway. Now they're trying to figure out, what do I do now? Not to mention the economy is not ideal. So there's certain businesses that are going to really struggle. Right now we do a fair amount of research. I do a lot of reading on, what people are interested in buying, and, restaurants are not at the high on the list there. And I know, Hannah, you and your husband owned a restaurant. Ed, were you involved in a restaurant at one point?
Nope. My family, all my family's in restaurant business, so I've avoided that.
There you go. That's probably what I remember then. But Hannah, I know you guys had a business, and it wasn't necessarily the way it played out wasn't ideal. Is that right?
Yeah, it was a name issue. Yeah, there was another restaurant that had one of the same words in our name in theirs also, and decided they've tried, I think, 2 or 3 times to sue us before, but then the last time we hired the wrong attorney and they ended up winning. And by then it was like, we were so beaten up. We've worked so hard to build that business. Right. It's just like, well, we were a $3 million restaurant. We were a comedy club restaurant. We had our square footage was very highly used, every single inch. We had catering out of the kitchen. We had a pizza delivery out of the kitchen, and still just over a name. It's definitely not where we expected it to go, for sure.
Eric,
absolutely.
That was devastating to me as well, because that's actually how I met Hannah.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
My furniture store was in the same parking lot as their restaurant. Well, retail space is so expensive, I didn't apply for any office space in mine. It was all showroom. So I used the restaurant every day from 2:30 to 3:30 because there's nobody in a restaurant during that time. That was my office to do all my orders and payroll. And so, when they had to shut down their restaurant, there went my personal office.
That's funny. But yeah, that's one of the challenges too, is there's certain industries that aren't going to transfer as well. And so, again, Hannah, you mentioned you were doing $3 million. How do we pull some of that revenue out? And I know restaurants are not the best example because their margins usually aren't that good. Traditionally it's 8%, 6%, 10%. Whereas other small businesses are 15 to 20%. So the margins are a lot leaner, but if you can figure out how to be more efficient and, to your point, capture as much revenue based on the square footage, you can actually turn really good profit. And then how do you reinvest that money? That's an important component. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that.
Cool.
David,
maybe transition just a little bit here.
Yeah.
So I think have fully covered how that dream can become a nightmare due to lack of planning, lack of time, or good old Uncle Sam taking half of your profit, right, from your sales. So all important points and great insights. I'd be curious, as we're looking maybe a little bit more short term, so maybe not even retirement, what are some of the challenges that prevent business owners from achieving that smooth exit? So any thoughts on that from the group?
I think the biggest point with young entrepreneurs, or even entrepreneurs that have been in business for a long time, but they're operating on a struggle, is they ignore the number one rule in being self-employed in business, and that's pay yourself first. They never, ever pull money out thinking, well, I just got to keep putting in the business. I got to grow my business. This is my retirement. I have to grow this. And they forget about pay yourself first. You have to take some sort of something from your company to start a nest egg. Rainy day fund or something, because Eric knows way better than I do because he's the business coach, but I'm sure he meets business owners all the time that have zero rainy day fund. If they have a bad month, they're in trouble.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a common occurrence. Jim, did you grab something?
Well, that's what he says is absolutely true. And I think a lot of that's mindset. It's lonely at the top in those offices. If you're running a company, a lot of times you don't have anybody to bounce ideas off of, or somebody to come in and sort of grab you by the shoulders and say, let's talk about this. And so that's the value of having somebody who can come in from the outside and work with you. And that's why, most professional athletes have coaches for the same reason. And so that's why we think there's a value in working with somebody like Eric and I, because they need a wake up call. They get so entrenched in what they're doing day to day that they just, it's overwhelming. So to take that, you probably experienced this, Ed, in running your business. You get caught in the tornado all day long. And before you know it, it's 8 o'clock at night. You're falling into bed. You're getting up early and you got to go do it again. And you didn't do anything to plan that week because of that. And it's just the way that it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I went to a couple of years ago. I went to a CEO seminar down in Dallas, and one of the people speaking on the stage was Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant's personal coach, not their big coach. It was their personal coach. And when you sit there and you think about that, golfers, pro athletes, high-end business, Nike, I just read that book on Nike. He still has a business coach at his level, because there's always more to be bouncing off the ideas. Just like you were saying, Jim, you can't go down the stream and go bounce it off the people below you in your own business. You have to have somebody else accountable. And I think that's where a lot of people make mistakes, is they feel they can't afford a coach. And the truth is, as an entrepreneur, you can't afford not to have a coach.
Well, and I've always believed if you're not willing to invest in yourself, how do you expect to grow?
Yeah, right. I know one of the people I follow pretty extensively online is Alex Ramsey, and one of the things he consistently says, if I only had a few $1,000s to start a business, I would take those few $1,000s and I would invest in marketing strategies. I would buy a training program on marketing strategies or sales strategies, because I would invest in myself to enhance those skill sets, because they're the two primary skill sets I'm going to need in my own business. And if I know those and I get those down, when I go to start my business, it's going to improve myself. I'm not going to buy any business for a couple $1,000s, but if I invest in myself and I put that money into myself, I'm going to improve those skill sets. And those are two primary skill sets that you're going to want when you start your business. And I can tell you that 10 times over, that's a big opportunity for a lot of small business owners, that they didn't invest in themselves in that way. And consequently, they're relying on somebody else. And I'm not saying that business owners should be doing all their marketing sales. I'm just saying that if you don't know it to a certain level, it's really hard to coach it and hold somebody accountable to it.
Well, as what Jim was also saying, as far as investing in yourself, a lot of the time when I'm talking with my clients about growing these funds, and when we start doing our annual reviews and they start realizing they're having more money than they thought they could ever have,
right?
You have to have the conversation with them of growing them internally, because that goes to business owners too. You will always revert back to where you believe your self-worth is on a subconscious level. So if you don't invest in yourself and grow yourself mentally and prepare, you won't be able to handle the funds that come in at retirement, and you'll squander it back down. It goes right back to people talking about lottery winners. They go back bankrupt within 5 years because their mindset wasn't a multimillionaire. So you can grow people's money to multimillions for retirement, but if you haven't grown the person, they won't be able to handle retirement.
That's so true.
Yeah. Phenomenal point. I literally just the other day was going through that with somebody, and it's like, if you thought that all your problems are going to be solved, if I give you $5 million and all your problems are going to be solved, you don't know what you're talking about, because $5 million isn't going to cut it, right? I mean, today's world, the way it is today, $5 million even invested, even if you could get 5%, you're going to pay taxes on that 5. And when it's all said and done, that's not, you're not retiring on that. I mean, you could eke out a decent living if you're going to do minimalist lifestyle. But I'm not putting in 80 hours a week to have a minimalist lifestyle when it's all said and done, That's interesting. And that's a great point.
Don't pay taxes.
What's that?
I said the key to that is don't pay taxes. Find the proper the strategy, you grow your money tax deferred and access it tax free.
That's it. Exactly. Awesome. And now you think that the as we kind of look at some of the other components that tie in here, when people are looking to make that transition mentally, right? Like I need to approach my business differently. And Ed, you started that path. The challenge that they run into is, one, they're caught up in the cyclone, like Jim was saying, right? I'm doing the day in and day out. I don't have time to focus on my plan. I'm not focusing on anything other than what it takes to make business work. We talk about I say it all the time. I'll probably say that every time we do this, one of these episodes, but that's why you have that third party perspective, right? You have that person who can kind of hold you accountable, challenge you and say, hey, by the way, don't forget to do this. I mean, we talk about this is important to you. Let's make sure that we have a plan for this, and kind of challenge people to do that. And I think that that's the big piece that happens with a lot of these small business owners is they have the best intentions in many cases, but they lose sight of it as they get caught up in those things. And really, without that plan, without the time, right, all the things that we just referenced, but you also probably need somebody to kind of challenge you along the way to really kind of tie that in and make sure that it works the way that you want it to work when it's all said and done.
Yeah, and we start out with addressing the business owner's mindset. I mean, I think that's the first place you start when we're doing an assessment with somebody is where are they? What are they thinking? What are their beliefs about money? How are they raised? Is money necessary evil? Is the root of all evil? Did you hear that at the dinner table growing up? That will affect how you think, and that has to be changed. And that's something that has to be continuously addressed throughout an engagement when we're working with people.
Yeah, and with your money 101, that does that kind of play into?
Oh,
yes.
You want to share?
Absolutely, 100%, because we're not taught how to handle funds on a big scale in school, if at all, right? So if we did not learn it at home, we're kind of just doing the bank account balance budgeting is what I call it, not hiring the professionals to say, hey, you can't afford to do this. We just see that, oh, we have enough money in the account. Let's go have lobster. When really we should still go have some chicken nuggets. So yeah, absolutely. So we teach those money concepts that a lot of people have never heard of, or maybe they've heard about it a little bit, but don't really know how to successfully apply it to not only their personal lives, but also in their business. And that's what we do in our Money 101 is those outreach educational workshops. And there's nothing for sale. There's no goal other than teaching these concepts so they can make educated, smart choices with their money, which makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
You know the best thing about financial principles, Eric?
What's that?
They were the same 2,000 years ago as they are today. And they'll be the same 2,000 years from now as they are today. They're just never taught. So that's what Hannah does every single month is she teaches financial principles that don't change. And if you can learn those, you hear me like, oh, I heard something like that once upon a time. But we truly believe if you had learned it 2 or 3 times in junior high and again in high school, and maybe if they would teach it again in college, that the regular masses of America wouldn't be in the financial problems that we're in today if people would just known and understood financial principles and applied them throughout their life. We wouldn't be in the world of we are in financially right now. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And Ed, you'd mentioned earlier about the paying yourself first, particularly as business owners, because I know personally, I've had about a half a dozen or more businesses as well. And one of the mistakes that I made in pretty much every one of them was I wasn't necessarily pulling money out for myself because I was in that growth. Well, I had the advantage of many of those years. They were supplemental. I had a regular full-time career and I, bought a business on the side, or I started a business on the side to kind of build it up, create like a secondary exit strategy or something like that. And it was always like, put the money back into the business, put money back into this. And then you look at it 3 years later and you're like, what do I have to show for all of this? Except a lot of extra time because I'm not taking anything out for myself. And so the last couple businesses, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to make sure I structure a salary and pull that at least, a committed salary, even if it was $1,000 a month. At least I didn't feel, because I can tell you, I personally had a love-hate relationship with 2 or 3 of my businesses because I was putting all the time and energy in, all the time that wasn't working in my full-time job, I'm putting into this side business, and consequently, taking time away from the family and the kids and things like that. But I'm like, this is going to pay off. It's going to be worth money. And then I'd get frustrated because I'm like, it's growing and I'm building it up because I'm not taking any money from myself. I'm like, why am I doing all this? Doesn't think it's really worth it.
Right.
So there's something to be said for that. And had I used a similar strategy to what you guys promote, I could have pulled money out, and I didn't need the cash. Right. It wasn't the whole point was I didn't need the money. I had a day job and I was getting paid well, but I wanted this business to grow. But if I had pulled it out, I could have put it in some kind of fund, right? An untaxed fund. And I could have put that money in there. Just didn't know that I could take advantage of it because I wasn't familiar with the programs.
Yeah,
exactly.
Hannah, could I ask you a question? In your practice, are you teaching kids these principles?
Absolutely. I encourage teens to come all the time. And I do have a workshop. It's called Mommy, Money, and Me. And that's specifically for teenagers. Hopefully we catch them before they have their first real job where they're offered different options where they can actually learn what those principles are and how to effectively choose when would it be beneficial to take what the employer offers and when would it be best just to start your own. So absolutely.
That's wonderful. I think people need to know about that.
Absolutely.
we teach between live, we call it, they're Money 101 dinners. We provide dinner. Like Hannah said, there's enough for sale. It's just our outreach ministry we do. Between the live classes and the virtual classes that we teach online, Hannah teaches virtual classes. We do 200 classes a month across the nation across America. In 33 states. We do 200 classes every single month that we teach for absolute free just to try. That's our passion, our ministry. That's what we love doing. We do the financial services part that makes us money, but the education is where that's what I mainly do. 99% of what I do is just teach.
That's
right.
great.
And Ed, as it applies to a business owner, that you would go in then and sit with the business owner, help them create a financial strategy for the business as far as creating some kind of retirement fund, but you're also offering a similar opportunity to the employees, right?
Correct. So we do a lunch and learn for companies where we'll go in and we'll do our financial class. It's modified for business structure. But we still do all the financial principles because that's just, you have to have that.
Sure.
But then we teach and educate not only the business owner, but also the employees. Here's the 3 different ways you can save. You have your 401k options. We have tax-free index account options where you can grow your money tax deferred, access it tax-free, and yet provides total protection for everybody. Or Roth IRAs. Another great way to be able to grow money. They're limited and they have limits, but we offer all 3 of those things when we go into a business. And it's amazing, whenever we go into a company, they're like, oh, well, we have 26 employees. We have 2 people participate in the 401k, but we're obligated to offer it. Yeah. Well, when we go in and you properly educate employees on how money works and how financial principles work and how growth happens, then, now, the last company I just did last month, they had 28 employees. That's why I use that example. They had 2 people on 401ks, and they've been in business since 1948. So they're established, Well, out of those 28, 24 of them opted in to do a tax-free index account or a Roth IRA.
Wow.
So the owner's like, man, if you can get 2 more people just to realize I'm offering them this money, and we got 24 out of 28. So
that's great.
Wow.
When people have an understanding, the problem with 401ks is it's usually handled by an HR person that says, hey, we match 5%. You want it? And the employee's like, I don't understand anything.
Yeah. And I'm going to say, it's a 20 or 30-year-old young adult that says, oh, you're going to take that money out of my check? No, that's okay.
Exactly.
I've heard horror stories about the stock market. No, I'm fine. Okay, don't worry about it. I'll keep it in my hand. I'm better off that way. Ironically,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say it's kind of changing the tweak of the subject a little bit. Like earlier, you mentioned a book, and so one of my most favorite books for business people or salesmen or anybody that's trying to generate something is The Go Giver by Bob Burg. I think I think that's a phenomenal book that everybody should read if you're in sales or you're a business owner. If you want to learn how to really give back and create a business that thrives, read The Go Giver by Bob Burg and analyze what your intentions are and
Nice.
how you're doing business.
Appreciate that. That's a good insight. And I agree with you. That's a great book. I was actually going to mention that we were talking about pulling money aside, and now I lost my train of thought. But we were talking about money aside, and I had mentioned earlier that the frustrations that I had by not pulling money out of my business and not knowing that I could have done that and put that money into some kind of fund to let it grow. But I was going to give an example. So you were talking about understanding the money, right? And again, from a business owner perspective, you also have, to your point, the employees, you're trying to educate them on what they should do with their money. So to give you some perspective, in my 20s, I'm going to say I was 24, 25 maybe, my dad got a $250 IRA, set me up with an IRA, a standard IRA. Put $250 in, opened it up and said, here, contribute to this, be really valuable to you years down the road. If I was in my mid 20s, my dad was pushing mid 40s. So we're about 20 years apart. So he had just begun build for his retirement. And I say just, I won't say entirely. Obviously had money invested in his home, but it's actually a designated retirement fund. Didn't have a ton put away, but my dad is the epitome of milking that, putting that money. It was like he was I want to call him a miser. That sounds really rough, but he was really good about putting money away. He was great. And so years later, my father and stepmother, they're fine, doing great. They put their money away and they did a great job saving money over the years. For me personally, I had that money and that $250 in that account, and that probably sat there for 6, 7 years, maybe 8 years. And it never got another penny in it. Now it did grow to about $500 in that span of time. But I never put a penny into it. Fast forward my mid 30s, and I'm pulling in, I don't know, 150, 175 a year. And I'm like, I'm getting hammered on taxes, by the way, because I'm employed, W-2 employee. And I'm like, I should probably look at putting some money away into retirement because, life is doing well. I was doing well. So I started putting money away, but I had not, because I'd never really seen any significant growth from it. Like anybody else, and I tell people all the time, I'm like, you see retirement funds grow in the first 10 years. It's so small that it's like so minimal that you don't really see it compile. And so I had that mentality, but I'm like, I'll put in the amount that I'm, the company was matching. David and I worked for that same company at the time. So I put it in and it was growing. And then I remember I got a big annual commission check or bonus check. And because of my program was already set up to take a certain percentage, it took a portion of my bonus check and dumped it into my retirement fund. So, and I want to say it was a year after I set it up. It was probably 1 year after I set it up. And my account almost doubled because the bonus check was so big. And I was like, oh crap, look at that. And then what happened was, and I didn't realize this, it maxed out. Because I had such a big bonus check, by the time July or August rolled around, I couldn't contribute anymore. So it stopped contributing. And then my net check, my net payroll check was bigger. And I'm like, what happened? And they're like, oh, because you maxed out the fund, you can't put any more in. The company was doing a match. It was 3%. It was the first 3%. They matched it dollar for dollar, and then 50 cents on the dollar the next 3%. So what happened was I was putting in at that time at my age, I was putting in like 27 and some change a year was what it amounted to between what I was contributing and what the company was contributing. Right. And so all of a sudden within, I'm going to say it was 6 or 7 years. No, it's probably closer to 8 years, about 8 years, 7 years. I had $250,000 saved up just like that. And I was just like, wow. And it was because it was on autopilot. It was just like, and every year, and then it was funny because every year I'd find out how much sooner that I would reach maximum payout, and then all the extra money was play money. It was basically, but what happened to me, and this is what's interesting about that. So one, I learned the lesson. I'm like, oh, so I'm like going to my kids in my 40s, and I'm like, no. You got to hear me. Put every penny you can in your retirement fund, because it grows, and then you watch, and it, in the beginning you won't feel it, but as it keeps going, it starts taking off. You just add that compounding effect. It grew really super fast, and all of a sudden it was real money. And I'm like, wow, that's something I can actually do something. So that was the message that I wanted to share, because that's a thing that I think, my younger years, I never thought about it. And I remember I wasn't much younger than my father was when I was like, oh, wow, I probably start putting some money away. And as soon as I did, it started really kind of taking off. I was in my prime earning years. So, and that's my speech to every employee when we were at this company. When employees start making real good money, they say, hey, I'm thinking about making some investments and stuff like that. I'm like, that's great. And they're like, what should I do? I'm like, put it in your 401k, because all I knew, and that was the success rate that I had. Ironically, at the same time, I was struggling because I'm making even more money. I'm capping out every year before the mid-year, and I've got all this extra money. And I'm like, had I known that there was another fund that I could go into, because at that point you can't put it in a Roth, right? There's no benefit to putting it in a Roth. And I understood the tax deferred, like being able to get out post-tax, right? So after the fact. And had I been familiar with your program, I would have been able to leverage that and put that money into that fund. And that was right. And I could have added even more to it, because there's other opportunities you can take advantage there.
Yeah. My kids are 27 and 25, both married, have kids. But 2 years ago, my son was telling me a story. He goes, yeah, I had my buddies were over at the house. We're playing video games, and I'm like, oh, I got to do my checkbook real quick and balance this. And, my buddy's looking over my shoulder going, holy cow, you have like that much money in your checking account? And he's like, well, yeah. And he goes, what is this? And he goes, TFIA, $300. What's that? And he goes, oh, that's my tax-free retirement account. He goes, you're already thinking about retirement? And he goes, dude, check out how much money's in this thing. I've only been doing this for 5 years. He pulled up his account with us and just blew his friends' minds. He's like, but he started at 20 years old and his brother was 21. They actually, one day out of the blue, said, hey, Dad, your class is tomorrow night, right? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, we went a lot as kids, but we'd sit in the back and play on our phones.
Right.
I think I actually want to come listen to it. I'm like, okay. So they both walked out and they're like, all right, how do we do a tax-free index account? And they've both been doing it since they were 20 and 21. And, it's ridiculous at 65 what they're going to have that I wish I would have done at 21.
Exactly. If we hadn't spent all that money on those businesses, right?
Yeah. Threw everything into furniture and manufacturing.
Awesome.
Good deal.
Well, hey,
David,
Eric,
where are we at with the agenda here?
Yeah, I was going to say there's one other thing I actually want to touch on. Hannah, you kind of mentioned it with the restaurant, and it reminded me of something I saw on your website about not necessarily retirement, although there's some great stuff on there too, but it was about kind of one thing or one event away. And I think as we're talking about pulling out money, I'd love to hear from you or the group kind of, we're thinking long term, but let's also think short term that there could be, that disaster around the corner personally or professionally that we need to be thinking about. So any thoughts or strategies on that?
Absolutely. As entrepreneurs and business owners, so many times we don't necessarily separate our personal and our business lives, right? They're so deeply entwined. So when one disaster happens in one, it affects the other. And our whole life goes down in flames. And that's where a major sickness or injury can really devastate both the personal life and the business life, especially because a lot of entrepreneurs these days, like we've talked about, don't know how to successfully structure and set up a business that can run without them. It's so dependent on them showing up, swinging the hammer, or unlocking the door every single day. Well, what happens when you can't, right? So that's where we have a thing called living benefits, where you get access to a big pile of cash that can help you hire someone to keep your business going, that can make sure that the business doesn't default on any loans, to make sure that the mortgage gets paid so you don't have that stress when you're showing up for work. So you can actually focus on healing, going through treatments, what have you, while your business and your home lives are still solid and there, because you have money to make sure that everything remains okay until you're back to 100%.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think go ahead, David.
Oh, yeah, I was just saying, I think that's really important. I mean, if people haven't learned that lesson over the last 2 years with COVID and everything else, I mean,
Right.
First of all, wake up call on retirement, but another wake up call right now that, hey, if you get sick, you get in an accident, a bus hits you tomorrow and you can't go, work the line in your restaurant, let's say, right? Whatever the case may be. Now you're in a very different financial situation and everything you work for is at risk. So I think that's great. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Any thoughts on that from the group?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that because I know recently I'd heard a statistic that, the three primary issue that happened is it's the stroke, heart attack, and cancer. The three primary, right, that would cause long care scenarios. And those are, all of them can be very debilitating. I've watched clients go through cancer. I watched one of my clients as a partnership. One of the partners died from a heart attack. And, just the month that he was in the hospital for an entire month, and how that impacted the business. And they had a partnership, right? The other brother could continue to run the business. But that's disruptive, right? And in so many different ways, it's a drain financially. It's a drain on your psyche. Personally trying to deal with the stress, and then you have all the other scenarios that play into it. And it's like, how does even the employees in the business are like, well, what do we do now? It's like, especially if it's, if it's only one owner, right? At least in that scenario, you got a partner, right? But it's so disruptive. And many times I personally felt like I'm Superman. Nothing's going to happen to me. I can't get sick. I can't get hurt. And I remember, David, you might remember, I had a pinched nerve issue quite 7-8 years ago, something like that. It was really bad. And it was super bad because I was actually, even though I wouldn't take the painkillers, prescribing me painkillers. And I was literally, for the first time in my life, in my mid 40s, debating I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not superhuman. maybe something can happen to me and it'll deter me, because I couldn't do normal functions. Like I couldn't type because I couldn't, the issue was running through my arm, and it was a funny bone. It was like I can't remember the name of the nerve, but the point was that I couldn't do normal daily functions. And it was really holding me back. And I was like, man, I don't know what I would do. And so if you're a business owner and you have something like that's deterring you from doing what your normal functions would be, that's a major scare. And to David, go ahead.
I was just say, most people are always thinking it's when I'm older. But let's just point out a couple real quick. So a couple months ago, 42-year-old client of mine had a stroke. This past summer, in 2022, 36-year-old female that owns her own business got diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer and had to go on full chemo, walk away from her business. She lost her business for doing that. But then everybody's heard Buffalo Bill's 24-year-old heart attack. So you don't have to be old to have something happen that can totally cripple your whole entire business and your personal life.
That's right.
Right. Yeah, I know. I was going to say earlier, those three contributors, those health contributors, number one reason for bankruptcy. That's what it was. Yeah. And that is right. And again, as a business owner, that's your source of income. And at least if you're employed somewhere where they have, they're willing to work with you, whatever, you got something to fall back on. But you're a business owner, it all falls on you. So if you're not protecting yourself, and I'm going to say cheapening out because you're like, oh, I don't need to pay for that extra. I'm like, no, that's actually all the more reason to make that investment, because you could lose it and you don't, right? But literally I heard a story from a gentleman who was sharing He's like, it was, the worst part was he actually said to his wife, he's like, I probably should just die. That's literally what he said to her. And I'm just like, what a terrible statement, because where they were at, have any kind of living benefits in place. And consequently, the business faltered and had to shut it down, and it cost them their home and their business and everything else.
Yeah.
So
Ed
super
and Hannah, you guys are the insurance experts. Maybe you could talk a little bit about disability insurance as it relates to this topic.
Well, I was just going to mention on the living benefits life insurance, for every one death claim that's paid by a life insurance company, they pay 9 living benefit claims. Mm-hmm. That's how much more likely you are to use your living benefits versus a death claim. Mm-hmm. So, there's 746 life insurance companies in America right now. There's only a small handful that do full living benefits, and there's only a very small handful, like 6 companies, that offer living benefits at no additional cost at all. Those are the companies that Hannah and I represent. So it's the new kind of life insurance. So if you just have the old death insurance, you don't have the living benefits. You have death insurance. You have the died years. Right. Well, when you're paying out 9-to-1 in claims to living benefits, because let's face it, today's medicine is so much more superior than it was even 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. 20, 30 years ago, you had a heart attack, you had like 20% chance of living.
Yeah.
Today, you have over a 96% chance of living, because our emergency response is so much better. The technicians on the ambulances, the paramedics, are so much better trained and have higher tech equipment. They get you to the hospital. They can go in the cath lab, and within 30 seconds, they're all the way up in your heart placing a stent. It's unbelievable, the science behind medicine that saves lives. But then, like Eric said, if you saves your life, then the person's going, I only had death insurance. It would have been better if I died. My family would be better off right now, because now I'm bankrupted.
Yeah.
So that's where, the living benefits, 22 different triggers to create that.
Yeah.
If you do 2 of the 6 activities of daily living, you get 2% of that policy every month, tax-free. So if you have a $500,000 face, that's $10,000 a month every month to help pay your bills, to hire an employee, to get somebody to do what you need to do, to pay your own mortgage, all those different things.
So the difference between that and traditional disability also, like that's what I had growing up many years back, just buy a disability policy. That's sunk money. When you put money into your programs, that money is actually earning money as an investment while it's sitting in there. Is that the major difference?
Yes, you can have just term life with living benefits, which is just the same, but it's 10 times cheaper than a disability policy, for the term. But a tax-free retirement has those living benefits attached to an index account. So your money can never lose ever in the market going down. But if something was to happen, it self-fulfills that retirement dream, or it protects that family.
Gotcha. Okay.
So disability insurance is more limiting, if that makes sense.
Yes.
You only get a percentage of your income, where with the living benefits, you get to decide what you would like your income to be if you were in that decision or situation.
So it's a much better alternative, is what you're saying, just because of the engineering that's gone in there.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, hey, we've covered a lot of ground, and I want to leave a little bit of time to hear a little bit more about HLJ and EDS. So a couple key points that I want to touch on of all the things we've talked about. One is, really at the beginning we talked about, don't let your dream prevent you from seeing reality, right? And I think that's, again, that big wake-up call that I'm hoping a lot of our listeners are getting today, or people watching this. We also talked about you need a detailed plan. Ed, I think you hit that one home pretty good. So I think well done there. And then business owners need to take intentional action to create an exit strategy. It's just not going to materialize, right? So you got to take intentional steps every day, every week, every month to make sure that strategy is in place. And then Hannah, I love it. Time is the enemy, right? So you got to take action today. So all great things. A couple other things: minimize constraints like taxes and fees, both on your personal finances, but also your business. And then I think really some great recommendations about options for managing your wealth and reducing risk. So just some great key points. And if I was going to kind of summarize that into 2 critical action items for our audience, one is, set aside time to map out your exit strategy, right? You need to block it out in the calendar, a couple hours, sit down, really think about it, talk to Ed, talk to Hannah, talk to a coach, and look at what your options are. So I think that's just super critical. And if you haven't done that, whether you're 20 or 50, right, now is the time, because time is the enemy and you need a plan. So want to make sure we covered some of those key things. Hannah, if you don't mind, I'd love to learn just a little bit more about HLJ and the Bold Women's Network. So anything else you want to share on those two?
The HLJ growth is really just a partnership. That's why I called it HLJ. It's me partnering with the individual, the business owner, or even if they're not a business owner, the individual, and making sure their growth is where they want it to be in the future, and doing that with strategies that are protected, where you're guaranteed never to lose money. So you're not riding the roller coaster ride that everyone else is riding, right? They're fun and games. Peaks and valleys are great for adventure, but not your finances. That's my little slogan.
Love it.
Yep, thank you. And the Bold Women's Network is a women's network that's across the U.S. that's really for women who maybe were W-2 and now they're entrepreneurs because they've decided to start their business and hang up their W-2 hat. Or maybe they're trying to do both and wanting their side gig at the moment to become their actual full-time job. And that's where I help give them resources, meetings to connect with, how to network, what does network mean, how do I go from a W-2 where I'm told what to do and where to go to time management where I've got to accomplish all this other stuff, working from home with all the distractions and getting everything done still. So that's what the Bold Women's Network is about.
Awesome. Thank you. And while you've got the mic, I love everything you guys talked about with Money 101. If somebody's listening and they say, hey, that sounds awesome, I want to do that. I want to do that for my business, for my employees, or, my teenagers, right? I think that's a great point too. Where can they learn about those upcoming events or the work that you guys are doing?
My website, which is hljgrowth.com. There's a events tab that tells you all the events that we have coming up. I usually do some type of a workshop, whether it's geared towards business owners or everybody or kids. I usually do one at least once a week. And then there's always recorded options and live options around the country. So we can always plug them into whatever it is that they prefer. And there's also a resources tab on my website where they can even watch a couple of videos, because I know some people are a little bit more visual than others and need to hear things multiple times. Little videos that they can take advantage of and watch those.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks so much, Hannah. Ed, tell us a little bit more about EDS Wealth.
So EDS Wealth is, it looks like my name. It's supposed to be a play on word, Ed's Wealth. It actually stands for Education Delivering Sustainable Wealth, because we are passionate about financial education, financial principles, making sure that people understand you can grow money without ever losing again, never lose money again, and creating that longevity wealth that not only sustains your life, but it also creates legacies. And that's how you create legacies, by passing down that generational wealth. But when to do that, you also have to grow the person and grow the person's family of who they're passing it down to. So that's all mindset and growth and learning and education to never run out of money again. So never lose money, never run out of money. And, I really specialize in, I help everybody, of course, but the small business entrepreneurs where my big heart is. I've been self-employed since I got out of the military. I know the struggles of growing businesses and learned the hard way of how to lose big businesses and not have any money to show for it. So, I'm now to the point of wanting to make sure that people understand how to pay themselves first, how to take advantage of the tax laws out there. We don't break laws. We just utilize them to grow as much money as possible, tax deferred instead of tax free. A little key thing, just to give an example. If you took $1 and you doubled that dollar every year for 20 years, dollar becomes 2, becomes 4, becomes 8, becomes 16. In 20 years, that's $1,048,000. Now, if you grew that, obviously we can't give 100% return on your money. I'm just showing you how the power of compound interest and the impact of taxes and fees. So now if you grow that money and it's in a regular tax account, so the average American is about 28% tax bracket. So a dollar becomes $2. Uncle Sam says, hey, that's a dollar gain. I want my 28 cents, please. So really you have $1.72. And that $1.72 doubles up $3.44, which then taxes back down. Then it doubles up to $5.92, taxes back down to $5.09, double tax, double tax, double tax. At the end of that 20 years, you have $53,243. That's $1 million difference. $1,048,000 if it's not taxed, $53,000 if it's grown in a taxable account. So understanding the value of how to grow money is where the huge return on investment later in life comes from.
And Ed, I just want to add to that there's a lot of additional opportunities that business owners have ways to do that, right? That they can take advantage of, and that's a certain important component to add there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm gonna your never lose money. It reminds Hannah and I were having a conversation at breakfast the other day, and it was it reminded me that it's Warren Buffett's investment philosophy. Rule number 1, never lose money. Rule number 2, rule number 1. Yeah.
That's what I live by.
Yeah. That one resonates with me after watching some of my money go away in 2008 and then again during COVID. And then
That's right. That's right.
Hey, so Ed, if somebody's listening to this, they want to learn more about some of those strategies or connect with you, where's the best place for them to do that?
They can connect me on my website, edswealth.com. And I think it's what it is. I should know that. Yeah. edswealth.com. I want to make sure I had that right. I didn't know if it was Wealth Agency, but yeah, edswealth.com is my website. I have little short, fun, 1.5 minute cartoon videos, talks about index accounts, how to never lose money, also talks about living benefits, what Hannah and I talked about. So those are on there. My contact information's on there. Hannah does virtual Money 101s. So if you go to her website, you'll be able to find her calendar of when that is. You can register for that, log in, learn everything from the comfort of your own home. You can always reach out to me. Like I said, we have 200 events a month across the nation. If you want to go to a live event, we probably have one close to you somewhere that we can get you in touch with.
Fantastic. And we'll put both of those links in the description, both for the podcast and our YouTube audience. So definitely check it out. Check out their websites, connect with Ed, connect with Hannah, and learn more about what they do. So let's transition real quick. Eric, Jim, My Biz Coaches. I keep hearing about this live event coming up. Anything you want to share with the audience today or anything new happening at MBC?
Yeah. So Jim agreed. That's voluntold, right? No, we're putting on an event on April 7th and 8th. So it's a 2-day coaching event specifically for entrepreneurs, where we'll be teaching different principles, strategies, and concepts on how to grow and scale the business. We're going to fairly extensively about AI and how to digitize and automate your business, and how AI can play a significant role, or does and will continue to, even more so in the future. How it plays a role in that for business owners and what they should be doing, what's important to them. Many people have probably heard about ChatGPT. We'll uncover some myths along with ChatGPT and how that's important and how to prepare for that accordingly. But we're pretty excited. It'll be, as I said, a 2-day event. We'll have a handful of guest speakers. I think we're looking at 5 guest speakers. David, have you decided to jump on the bandwagon yet?
It's still in consideration, Eric, but I appreciate the arm twisting. Thank you.
Yeah, you got 8 more weeks, man. I'm going to every time.
I know it. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Cool.
So I know.
I want to learn more about your coaching or your events. Yeah, go ahead.
Just going to say that, and Jim's going to be there. I know he's going to be talking about a couple of topics. So really excited about the opportunity to kind of put this on.
Well, if Jim's going to be there, that changes everything, Eric.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Awesome.
Eric, where can people find information about those events? Do you have them up on your website, or is there some place where
they're not up just yet? The landing page should be up next week. So yeah, we'll introduce that and put that out there next week. But great teaser opportunity to let people know, make plans for the 7th and 8th, because you're going to want to be there.
There you go. Yeah, and in the meantime, right, stay up to date on all the events. Check out My Biz Coaches on social media. You guys can subscribe as well on the website, mybizcoaches.com. And if you want to learn more about Train, Lead, Grow and some of the training and leadership solutions we offer, head over to trainleadgrow.com and be sure to subscribe to the show and podcast if you enjoyed today's episode. So Ed, Hannah, Jim, Eric, thanks for joining us today. And thank you, audience, for watching and listening. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody.